What is the rudest thing you have experienced while eating dinner at a friend's house? I was 13 when my classmate Olivia invited me over for dinner. Our moms worked at the same office, and Olivia's mom thought it would be nice for us to hang out. I barely knew Olivia. She was one of those kids who acted friendly, but always seemed to think she was better than everyone else. My mom made me go anyway, saying it would be good for me to make new friends. I showed up right on time wearing my nicest dress and carrying a small box of chocolates my mom had picked out as a thank you gift. When I knocked on the door, Olivia's mom opened it and barely glanced at me before snatching the chocolates and tossing them on the kitchen counter like they were garbage. No thank you, no smile, nothing. The house smelled weird, like old food mixed with cleaning supplies. Olivia was sprawled on the couch scrolling through her phone and didn't even look up when I walked in. Her dad was watching TV in his underwear and a stained shirt. I stood there awkwardly for 10 minutes before Olivia's mom finally told us to sit at the dinner table. That's when things got really strange. Olivia's mom came out carrying only 3 plates. She set one down in front of me and I looked down at what was supposed to be my dinner. There was some grayish meat that looked like it had been reheated multiple times, mushy green peas that were practically liquid, and 2 rock-hard biscuits that could have been used as weapons. Olivia got her plate next and immediately made a disgusted face. She looked at her mom and said, "Didn't we give this exact same food to Pepper yesterday?" Pepper was their golden retriever who was currently sleeping under the table. Olivia's mom just shrugged and said, "We had leftovers. I wasn't going to let perfectly good food go to waste." I sat there staring at my plate, trying to figure out if I was really being served dog food. Meanwhile, Olivia and her mom had completely different meals. Fresh chicken breast with rice and steamed vegetables that actually looked edible. I politely asked if there had been some kind of mistake with my plate. Olivia's mom rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might fall out of her head. "Oh, honey, if you're going to be picky about what we're offering you, then you can just sit there and go hungry. We don't run a restaurant here." Olivia started giggling like this was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. I felt my face turned bright red with embarrassment. I tried to take a small bite of the meat just to be polite, but it tasted like it had been sitting in the refrigerator for a week. The texture was rubbery and it had this sour aftertaste that made me gag. I quickly put my fork down and asked if I could use their phone to call my mom. Olivia's mom gave me this look like I was a piece of trash she'd found stuck to her shoe. "What's wrong now? The food not fancy enough for your delicate palate?" I mumbled something about not feeling well and asked again about calling my mom. Olivia was still snickering behind her hand while eating her actual human food. Her dad never even acknowledged I existed the entire time. When my mom picked me up 20 minutes later, I was trying really hard not to cry. The car ride home was quiet until my mom asked how dinner went. That's when everything came pouring out. The reheated dog food. The way Olivia's mom treated me like I was some kind of charity case. How they gave me completely different food while they ate a real meal. My mom's hands tightened on the steering wheel and I could see her jaw clench. She didn't say much that night, but the next morning she made several phone calls. First to my school's guidance counselor, then to her supervisor at work, and finally to Olivia's mom herself. I couldn't hear exactly what was said, but I caught phrases like absolutely unacceptable and treatment of a guest. I never went back to Olivia's house, obviously. I was 13 when my classmate Olivia invited me over for dinner. Our moms worked together, and Olivia's mom thought it would be good for us to hang out. I barely knew Olivia. She was one of those kids who acted friendly but always seemed to think she was better than everyone else. My mom insisted I go, saying it would be good to make new friends. I showed up on time, wearing my nicest dress and carrying a small box of chocolates my mom picked out as a thank you gift. When I knocked, Olivia's mom opened the door and snatched the chocolates, tossing them on the kitchen counter as if they were garbage. No thank you, no smile, nothing. The house smelled strange, a mix of old food and cleaning supplies. Olivia was sprawled on the couch, glued to her phone, completely ignoring me. Her dad was watching TV in his underwear and a stained shirt. I stood awkwardly for 10 minutes before Olivia's mom told us to sit at the dinner table. Then things got weird. Olivia's mom brought only 3 plates, one for Olivia, one for her dad, and a suspicious plate for me. The food looked awful, grayish meat that smelled like it had been reheated dozens of times, mushy green peas turning to liquid, and 2 rock-hard biscuits that could have been weapons. Olivia looked at her plate and immediately said, "Didn't we give this same food to Pepper yesterday?" Pepper was their golden retriever, sleeping soundly under the table. Her mom shrugged. "We had leftovers. Didn't want good food to go to waste." I stared at my plate, wondering if I was being served dog food. Meanwhile, Olivia and her mom had fresh chicken breast, rice, and steamed vegetables. Real meals. I politely asked if there was a mistake with my plate. Olivia's mom rolled her eyes like I'd insulted her. If you're going to be picky, you can just sit there and starve. We don't run a restaurant here. Olivia giggled like it was the funniest thing ever. I could feel my face burning with embarrassment. I took a small bite, rubbery meat with a sour aftertaste that almost made me gag. I put my fork down and asked if I could use their phone to call my mom. Her mom looked at me like I was dirt stuck to her shoe. What now? The food not fancy enough for you? I mumbled I wasn't feeling well and asked again. Olivia snickered behind her hand while eating her real food. Her dad never acknowledged me once. When my mom arrived 20 minutes later, I was barely holding back tears. The car ride was silent until she asked how dinner went, and all the hurt spilled out. The dog food plate, the way I was treated like charity, the different meals they gave me while they ate well. My mom's hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel, her jaw tight. The next day, she made calls to my school counselor, her boss at work, and finally to Olivia's mom. I overheard phrases like absolutely unacceptable and treatment of a guest. I never went back to Olivia's house. That night taught me how cruel and rude people can be, especially when they think they're better than you. Story: at my daughter's graduation, my husband announced, "I've decided to start a new life without you." His girlfriend was sitting with our friends. Everyone went quiet. I smiled and said, "Congratulations on your honesty." Before leaving, I handed him an envelope. When he opened it, he started screaming. Chapter 1. A day of pride turned bitter. The auditorium buzzed with energy, caps and gowns swept past, tassels swaying as proud parents craned their necks for one last photo. For months, I had dreamed of this day, our daughter's graduation. I sat in the second row, front and center, beaming with pride. Every late night, every scraped knee, every packed lunch, every tear I wiped from her cheeks as a child had led to this moment. She wasn't just my daughter. She was my world. My husband sat beside me, holding my hand loosely, almost distracted. I brushed it off at first. Nerves, maybe. After all, this was a milestone for us as much as for her. But then, as the dean finished his speech and applause filled the air, my husband rose to his feet. He cleared his throat, his voice carrying unnaturally loud in the auditorium. "I'd like to say something." The applause tapered into confusion. Faces turned toward us. And then he said the words that detonated my life in a single breath. "I've decided to start a new life without you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My daughter's smile froze mid-celebration. My friend sitting just rows away stared in shock. And then I saw her, his girlfriend, sitting smugly among them, watching like she was entitled to my seat, my family, my life. The humiliation was instant, the silence afterward deafening. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I smiled, calm, composed. "Congratulations on your honesty," I said softly. Then I reached into my purse, pulled out a sealed envelope, and placed it into his hands. "For you." And I walked out of that auditorium with my head high, leaving behind whispers, gasps, and a stunned silence. What he found inside would make him scream. Chapter 2. The envelope opens. The envelope was small, cream-colored, with his name written neatly on the front. When I placed it in his hand, he smirked like it was some dramatic gesture that meant nothing. He thought it was a goodbye letter, maybe even a plea. But when he tore it open, the smirk drained from his face. The contents inside were 3 documents, bank statements showing that every major account he thought he controlled had already been transferred. The accounts were empty, the balances frozen. His access had been cut off the night before. Property deeds, legal papers proving that the house, the cars, and even the lake cottage were all in my name, thanks to a series of quiet moves I had made years earlier. Moves he never noticed because he was too busy chasing fun. Legal papers, a set of preliminary divorce filings with attached evidence, photos, messages, and hotel receipts documenting his affair collected meticulously. Undeniable. The very tools he thought he would use to humiliate me were already turned against him. The scene in the auditorium. As he flipped through the papers, his face flushed crimson. He stammered, his voice breaking the hush of the auditorium. "What is this?" You can't do this." His girlfriend leaned over, trying to glance at the pages. When she saw the word divorce stamped in bold at the top, her smug grin vanished. The guests, our friends, our family, our daughter's classmates' parents, all leaned closer, whispering. The scandal wasn't whispered behind closed doors anymore. It was laid bare in front of hundreds. And I was gone. Walking down the steps head high, while behind me his shouts echoed, "This isn't fair. You can't take everything from me." But it was too late. Chapter 3, The Girlfriend's Shock. The sound of his rage filled the auditorium, bouncing off the high ceilings. But it wasn't anger alone. It was fear. The fear of a man realizing that the foundation beneath his feet had already crumbled. His girlfriend, the one who had sat smugly among my friends, basking in stolen attention, now leaned forward to snatch the papers from his trembling hands. Her face went pale as she skimmed them. The bank statements with zeros where wealth should have been. The property deeds proving everything was tied to me, not him. The evidence packet showing her name and hotel receipts, texts, and photos. Undeniable proof of her part in the affair. The whispers from the crowd turned sharper, louder. People craned their necks to look at her now, judgment etched in every glance. She hissed at him under her breath, but loud enough for those around to hear. "You told me you had money. You told me you were leaving her rich. You've got nothing. Nothing." Parents, teachers, and friends who had once clapped politely for him were now glaring. Some laughed under their breath. Others shook their heads in disgust. What was meant to be his moment of liberation had turned into his public trial. And the girlfriend who thought she'd won, she was already sliding her chair back, grabbing her purse. Her loyalty vanished the second she realized the future he promised was nothing but ashes. She didn't even stay for the diploma ceremony. She left him there, broken, humiliated, in front of everyone. As I stood outside the hall, hearing the chaos unfold through the doors, I smiled to myself. Because the sweetest revenge wasn't just exposing him. It was watching the woman he betrayed me for abandon him in the very moment he needed her most. Chapter 4. My daughter's reaction. While the auditorium buzzed with chaos, her father raging, his girlfriend storming out, all eyes turned to the one person caught in the center of it all. My daughter. She had walked across the stage just minutes earlier, diploma in hand, her smile radiant, but now she stood frozen at the edge of the stage, watching the man she once called her hero unravel in front of her classmates, her teachers, and our entire community. She clutched the diploma tighter, her eyes wide, glassy. For years he had convinced her I was bitter, too controlling, the reason the marriage failed. And now, in the most important moment of her life, he had humiliated her for the sake of flaunting a mistress. The whispers weren't just about him. They were about her, and she knew it, as he shouted, waving the papers in a panic. She stepped down from the stage. But instead of rushing to him, she walked straight past, her heels clicking on the floor until she reached the aisle. She paused only once at my empty chair. She touched it softly as if to mark her choice, then turned toward the exit. Her classmates, watching in silence, parted for her like the Red Sea. She left the auditorium without a word, but the message was louder than any scream. She wasn't his pawn anymore. Later, when she found me standing outside in the cool evening air, she simply whispered, "I'm coming with you, Mom." And in that moment, I realized I hadn't just reclaimed my dignity. I had reclaimed my daughter. Chapter 5, The Public Reckoning. The graduation had ended in chaos, but the fallout was only beginning. For families like his, humiliation doesn't stay behind closed doors. It spreads like wildfire through whispers, gossip, and community judgment. By the next morning, videos had surfaced online. A father screaming in the middle of his daughter's graduation. His girlfriend storming out in shame. Students and parents looking on in disbelief. The man who once carried himself as a pillar of stability, respected among our friends and neighbors, was now a punchline. People didn't see success or dignity when they looked at him anymore. They saw betrayal and weakness. Our friends, the very ones who had sat next to his mistress at the ceremony, stopped returning his calls. His colleagues at work whispered behind his back. Parents from our daughter's school avoided him entirely, their eyes full of contempt. He had thought he was choosing a better life. Instead, he had chosen to destroy his standing in the one circle that mattered most, his own family and community. I didn't defend myself. I didn't speak publicly. I let the documents, the images, and his own outburst do all the talking. Because the most powerful revenge isn't shouting louder. It's letting truth echo until it drowns out every lie. The same man who tried to humiliate me in front of hundreds had succeeded only in humiliating himself. And the best part, I didn't even have to raise my voice. Chapter 6, the final lesson. Time has a way of magnifying humiliation, and his betrayal had already become a story passed from one dinner table to another. But for me and my daughter, the real power of that day wasn't just in what he lost. It was in what we gained. The girlfriend who had been his bold declaration of freedom vanished from his life within a week. She hadn't signed up for a man stripped of wealth, respect, and dignity. She left him in the same silence I had walked away with. Only hers was colder. At work, he faced the consequences of his public meltdown. Senior partners questioned his judgment, his reliability. In a profession built on reputation, he had none left, and socially, he was invisible. Invitations stopped. Calls went unanswered. He had once basked in admiration. Now he lived in avoidance. For my daughter, the experience became her greatest awakening. She told me later that she felt ashamed at first, humiliated by the whispers at her graduation. But then she realized something powerful. She didn't inherit his shame. She inherited my resilience. She moved forward with clarity, grounded not in his broken promises but in my quiet strength. Her future no longer carried his name. It carried her own. And me, I learned that sometimes revenge doesn't come with shouting or triumph. It comes with silence, patience, and truth. The kind that can't be denied when it's revealed at just the right moment. The envelope wasn't just a weapon. It was closure. He tried to humiliate me in front of our friends, in front of our daughter, in front of the world. But when the screaming stopped, when the dust settled, only one truth remained. The only person who lost their family that night was him. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. Epilogue. Years later. Since you asked me to continue, let's push this story into its natural conclusion years later, where the lessons and revenge ripple into their final forms. His life after the graduation scandal, he never really recovered from that night. Career within a year, he had been quietly pushed out of his firm. Clients didn't want their names associated with someone whose public meltdown was viral fodder. Reputation. Every time he walked into a room, people remembered the graduation screams. The whispers followed him everywhere. Relationships. The girlfriend who sat smugly at the ceremony never returned. Others came and went, but they didn't stay. They didn't want a man broken in reputation and fortune. He thought leaving me would be the beginning of his new life. In reality, it was the end of his old one, and no new beginning ever came. My daughter's journey, the graduation that should have been stained forever by shame, became, oddly, her turning point. She told me years later that walking out of that hall and choosing me was the moment she learned what loyalty really meant. She built her future on that principle. She graduated again with honors this time and invited me proudly to stand beside her at every milestone. Her words once cut me deepest. "Dad, you're the problem." But her words years later healed me completely. "Mom, you were always my home, my own peace. I didn't rebuild by chasing revenge. I rebuilt by living well." The envelope, the documents, the exposure, those were the revenge. The years that followed were the victory. I invested in myself, grew my independence, surrounded myself with people who valued respect. Every laugh, every quiet dinner with my daughter, every morning I woke up without carrying his betrayal. All of it was sweeter because I had once been denied it. The final callback. At graduation, he had announced, "I've decided to start a new life without you." He thought it was his triumph. But years later, it was clear the only new life that began that day was mine. And it was better than anything he could ever destroy. Was this revenge perfectly justified?